What exactly is the future of bullet heavens or survivor likes? Well, the 4-man team at Realm Archive seem to think that it is to mash it up with Hades. Death Must Die is a bullet heaven that takes inspiration from a lot of different mechanics from different sources, mashes them all up, but primarily it's somewhere between Halls of Torment plus Hades. There's some interesting things to dig into here, especially as an early access game. There is feedback that needs to be given, but also clarifying what sort of game this is in case you are a bullet heaven fan, which seems to be a portion of my audience, if it's for you. I am Mugthief, a person that plays too many games and thinks too much about them, and I'm getting this video out before Asmongold discovers this game. Gotta stay one step ahead. As always, if at any point in the review anything here seems interesting to you, remember to hit the like button. That's how this reaches more people. Death Must Die is what I like to call an active bullet heaven, because you do need to aim and shoot. Plays more like a dual stick shooter, something more along the lines of Halls of Torment or Greedland. It's not completely automatic. It also does not have a traditional meta progression. You choose between 5 characters, 4 melee and 1 ranged, which I'm not sure is something I love. They each have a primary attack, and the big difference between this and other games in the genre is that instead of obtaining a long list of weapons and passives, you have an upgrade system that is pretty much Hades. Currently, in the early access state that the game is in, there are 6 different gods, and you can get any of them, and they will offer you 3 different upgrades. And those upgrades all align with whatever they are about, be they about cold damage or fire damage or the time damage or chaos, which is, war essentially. It does do the same thing that Hades does, where your 2 main components here, which are your attack and your dash, once you lock it into a specific god, that is a very core part of how you're going to play. But aside from that, you're just going to get different gods. They're going to offer different types of passives. Look, it's really just Hades, and if you haven't played it, I think you can still get the general picture. So you pick one of your 5 characters, you jump into the 1 level that's available at the moment, and you destroy things. Each character has their own specific weapon, so you might want to build them differently. Every time you collect enough experience and you level up, you then choose one of these boons and continue your run. Once you finish your run, there is no meta progression, because this is where the comparisons to Hall of Torment continue. Not only is it a more active type of game with a lot of differences between the characters, but its main progression is loot-based. Halls of Torment does feature meta progression where you just upgrade base things like more damage or more health regen and things like that. None of that is here. Everything is completely tied to your loot. The exception are achievements that will let you unlock subclasses for each of the characters. Any subclass, I don't have all of them, but the ones I've seen are all an upgrade, a direct upgrade to the base character, but then they are more specialized in one direction or another to round out your build or give you a different focus for them. But there is no spending money to upgrade base stats. Instead, it's all loot. As you progress through each run, the enemies will drop loot. The further in you get, the better loot they'll drop. This loot doesn't have to even fit the character you're playing. It can just be good loot, and then when you finish the run, you can give it to a different character. This is where you'll find a lot of those extra things that you would expect from the meta progression. So more HP, more armor, HP regeneration, farther range to pick things up, better experience gains, all of those things. Even things like your base attack speed or your damage on your weapon. So the best reason that I can tell you why this game, despite it being in early access and I think having less content than Halls of Torment or other competitors in the space, is that while Halls of Torment feels very Diablo 1, Diablo 2-ish, Death Must Die feels more Diablo 3 or Diablo 4. It's a little lighter on tone, very frantic, more arcadey, more of an emphasis on just getting tons of loot all of the time. If what I've described so far seems interesting to you, I think it's not a bad purchase at the moment. You're gonna get 3 to 6 hours of playtime, which is what the developers themselves say, and I agree, with all of the things that are going to come in what they estimate to be 1 more year of early access. However, this period is critical, and I do want to talk about the fact that I think the more Diablo ARPG focus for bullet heaven games is a very interesting one. I think things that lean harder into that ARPG loop, and even things that have a more active combat system closer to an ARPG, or more of a character action game, for example something like Hades but more directly in how you fight, would be really good combinations for the genre that wouldn't touch what sets it apart and makes it special to me. There are some things here that I want to leave as feedback in case the developers hear this. There needs to be sounds when you receive experience. Enemies' attacks and their telegraphs need to have white stroke borders, you know, with an inner glow to them to just look cleaner and stand out more. Number pop-ups need to have a better stroke effect, or maybe be a little bit more punchy, the numbers that jump out. And as a larger general feedback of where I think a game like this should go in the future, keep in mind it may not, I'm just speculating, I'm just giving feedback here, is leaning in harder to that more arcade ARPG loop. The base classes themselves don't really differentiate themselves much from each other except for the ranged character, for the mage. And it's neat that you unlock these subclasses, and they do remind me of things you would see, for example, in Diablo 3 or even parts of Diablo 4. The two key concerns for a game like this is how is it going to pan out in the end game? What is the end game grind? The other main concern is what is the end game of a run, because I think the boon system from Hades can sometimes feel limiting, feel like you're making very hard choices that do not lead to a final big explosion of power like you would see in this genre with things like evolutions or fusions from other games. If certain boons can be combined, like they are in Hades towards the end of a run, that would be fantastic to give people specific builds that they will shoot for to get those combinations. At the moment, there are things that are more ultimate skills. During the tutorial, you get a giant dragon. But I just want to leave a note that there needs to be things that motivate people to reach certain builds in the endgame. And for the total endgame, I think that a focus on loot would be important, but if we're going to be grinding for loot in the endgame, I think that loot needs to be transformative and not just stats. This is a lot of hard work because it's a big deal with ARPGs, but having weapons that completely transform your attack type or shape or pattern, having gear that their affixes can change specific skills. For example, now Chain Lightning also burns enemies, and that could be affixed to a piece of gear. Things like that, just randomizing a very big pool with maybe some unique legendaries to grind for, very much like an ARPG, I think would suit a game like this very well. Because when a bullet heaven game doesn't have the whole, we have 50 different weapons and 40 different evolutions and 17 fusion combinations and different passives, it really needs to differentiate each of those characters and have a good progression system towards the end to make the characters feel more your own, despite the fact that you are focusing on one primary attack. Other games that kind of fall in the middle between a more active and a more passive bullet heaven would be, in my opinion, the best one of them all, Holocure, save the fans, which compensates this by having a ridiculous amount of characters, all of them very unique. And even though you will build each of them pretty much the same way once you figure out the optimal build, there's so many of them that figuring out those builds and the variety of playing through with each of them is enough to keep you hooked. Here, we only have 5 characters, and they do not have very special passives. It's just the main attack. But the game feels really good to play at the moment, and I have very high expectations for what it could be later on. For me, my top 3 in this genre are definitely Vampire Survivors plus its crazy DLC, just because it has a charm that hasn't totally worn off yet. Then a Halls of Torment, because I think it's a very fresh take on the genre, a unique look and cool systems to it. And then Holocure. I think this one could easily be up there, but we're gonna have to wait and see how it goes. For the price, what's here is gonna give you a lot of fun, and hopefully a say in what happens down the line with games like these. If you found this video interesting, informative, remember to hit the like button so it reaches more people. If you want more opinions on games, including my very long form essays and all sorts of other things that I come up with, hit subscribe. It would make me really happy. If I could, I would give you a hug for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.